There was a mature energy at Panthers practice and inside their locker room on Monday as there are 4 games remaining left in the regular season here in 2025. Can they get the job done and win the NFC South? We'll talk about that right here on Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers with you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and yes, of course, Friday, your team every day. That's our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for watching the show right here on YouTube and listening wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Today's episode of Locked On Panthers is brought to you by FanDuel. If you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. 4 games remain here in the regular season of the 2025 NFL season for your Carolina Panthers. New Orleans this weekend down there in the Big Easy, then home against Tampa and against Seattle, and then a Week 18 matchup that potentially, depending upon how the next 3 weeks play out, could be played in primetime, Sunday night football, maybe for Carolina and Tampa with the NFC South division title on the line. The hope is it won't take until Week 18 for the Panthers. They could have this thing wrapped up by next Sunday. Now, when speaking to somebody about this today, they feel like that's far-fetched because the Falcons are just awful. But this is also a Bucs team that's lost 4 out of their last 5 games, and they are trending in the wrong direction, while Carolina has just been yo-yoing since week 3, win, loss, so on and so forth. This is a team that is right there in position to be a year ahead of schedule and win the division title here in 2025. But it's going to take winning a couple of tiebreakers potentially, and the common opponent tiebreaker. I talked about that on Monday. I left one common opponent out of that, the Rams. It doesn't change things, but still want to go back over that here on today's show. The Panthers want to win a division. Obviously, you want to see this team host a home playoff game for the first time since January of 2016, which was a part of the 2015 season. A decade ago is the last time we saw playoff football here in Uptown Charlotte. You want to see it, but you still want this team, first and foremost, to go to the playoffs. Can they get in via the wild card? It's possible. It's going to be tough, but it's still possible. We'll go over that possibility. But let's start off by discussing the vibe in the locker room at practice on Monday, a rainy, gloomy, damp day in Uptown Charlotte. But the sun is really shining for a lot of Panther fans because it's exciting, guys. You're sitting here. It's week 15 of the season. We're heading into the holidays, and the Panthers are playing meaningful football in December. And yeah, they did a couple of years ago in 2022, and that really came out of nowhere because the Tom Brady-led Bucs just kind of dragged ass all season long and allowed the Panthers to come back after Steve Wilkes took over as head coach and to have that de facto NFC South title game in week 17. If it weren't for the Bucs just lethargy and their ineptitude for most of the season, that would not have been a scenario. But here, Carolina sitting, coming out of the bye, tied for first place, in full control with 4 games left in this regular season. And the hope for me going into this week was that after the bye, these guys would get healthy, that they would be able to get not just a physical break, but a mental break away from football. 20 straight weeks going back to the end of July when they started training camp for this team. I was hoping that they would have a renewed focus and that they would be ready to go. And when I was at the locker room today, inside the locker room, I didn't go to practice, missed that, the whole portion outside in the rain. Glad I didn't miss that. But I was inside the locker room and we talked to a couple guys, and you could really feel just how laser focused this team is right now. Austin Corbett, Christian Roseboom, Jalen Coker, Mike Jackson. Got a couple of quotes from each of those guys. Austin Corbett, start off with him. We just asked him, what was the vibe today at practice? Dave Canales said last week on Monday, before letting those guys go away for the bye, that he wanted them to come back and hit the ground running. Austin said, quote, I think that there was a mature energy. There's an understanding of that there's work that can be done, that has to get done. And there's a moment that hasn't been around this place since I've been here where we're tied first. We can go get this, and it's all in our hands. So there's a mature respect for the moment that hasn't been around this place in a while. A mature energy or mature respect that guys understand what's in front of them and that they are focused on getting the job done and doing all the small things throughout the week so that happens for them this year. Christian Roseboom, he's been in the spot, much like Austin Corbett, having been with the Rams before last year they went to the playoffs. He said, when just asked about his approach in the coming weeks, that quote, the biggest thing is we can't make the playoffs today. We can't make the playoffs on Sunday, so we really need to take it one game at a time. We're not going to win 4 games in a row by beating the Saints on Sunday. Each week's kind of its own entity, and really that's just how I'm looking at it that way. Jalen Coker, also pretty focused when talking to him. We asked him about his excitement level, and he said, I think it's through the roof. But it's not like he was smiling when he said it. He just said, I think it's through the roof. It's the NFL. So we're going to have to approach every game, every week, and just go 1-0. And then this one really kind of got me laughing, and a lot of people, too, reacted in this scrum. Mike Jackson was asked about what it means for the team to have started off 0-2 and to now be tied for first place coming out of the bye with 4 weeks left to go. And he said it doesn't mean nothing because we still got to play both teams twice. So being tied first, it's like, yeah, it's cool, but still got to play the Saints, still got to play the Bucs twice. To me, it don't really mean nothing. Yeah, I'm happy, but we still got to play them twice. You still have to play them no matter if you're bad in a division or first. That's how I look at it. So to Mike Jackson, they're 7-6. They're tied for first place. Doesn't mean anything to them. Doesn't matter because the job's not done. And even if they weren't 7-6 and weren't in first place, they still have to play the Bucs twice. They still have to play the Saints twice, and they still would want to win those games. And of course, the Bucs, the Saints, and obviously Seattle want to win those games against Carolina as well. So when you just listen to the quotes, and I wish I could play the audio, it's not going to be good enough for y'all. And also, like with this being, podcast, but also on YouTube, I didn't record it video wise, so it wouldn't really make a lot of sense. But all these guys were pretty, not monotone, but there wasn't a ton of emotion when they were speaking to us today. There was a pretty, like Austin Corbett said, a mature energy surrounding that locker room as they know what's in front of them. They know what they got to do, and they're not going to get overly excited and just be happy to be at this spot, which you want to hear. You want them to obviously be excited about the opportunity at hand, but you don't want them to act like they've never been there before. Austin Corbett's been there before. Christian Roseboom has been there before. I think even Mike Jackson back in Seattle has been there before. Jalen Coker hasn't. Guys like Turk Wharton, who we also talked to, he's been here before. There's plenty of guys in this locker room, in particular the two leaders, in Jaycee Horn and in Derek Brown, who have never been in this spot. So some interesting just perspective from Corbett, from Roseboom, from Coker, from Jackson, Turk Wharton, and everybody else who spoke to us today in the locker room as Panthers, again, are preparing for their Week 15 matchup and a revenge game against New Orleans Saints on Sunday. We did speak to Dave Canales as well on Monday, and a few things that stood out. No updates on Jaycee Horn and Clyde Sherless until Wednesday. JC's in the locker room. No one spoke to him. I'm guessing he'll be fine and that he's cleared concussion protocol. There's no benefit to them announcing that on Monday. And this has been the common thread throughout the season. When there is a significant injury, Dave Canales tells us on Monday. When it's a kind of a day-to-day, week-to-week thing, he doesn't say anything until Wednesday when the official injury report comes out for the week. So no updates there on JC or Clauden. Both those guys are in the locker room. Both of them were smiling, seem to be totally fine. But I don't know. We'll find out on Wednesday, but I'm expecting that both those guys will be good to go on Sunday. Rob Hunt. Dave did tell us about a month ago that potentially around the bye, they could open up the return to practice window for Robert Hunt, and that would be a 21-day window for them to return him from IR officially. And he said that they're getting closer, but they're not going to open up the window this week. The hope is that at some point in time, whether it be next week or the week after that, maybe even in the playoffs, that they will get Rob Hunt back this season. And Dave said even last week before the bye that when Rob Hunt's healthy, he will play for the Panthers. No matter whether they're in the playoffs or out of the playoffs, he wants him to play. So if it's a meaningful game, a meaningless game, they want him out there ready to go. And David Moore is also somebody who's been out since I think week 4 against New England with the elbow injury. He's also getting closer to having his window opened up as well. And as far as just the focus, what he's looking for this week, Dave said he's looking for signs of maturity from this group to build off of wins. They've not been able to really handle the success so far this year. We saw when they beat Green Bay. They then go and lose to the same Saints who they're playing on Sunday, who were a 1-win team at the time. We just saw them beat LA. How do they respond? And according to Austin Corbett, there was mature energy, and Dave liked what he saw out of them at practice on Monday. He did watch the game on Sunday between the Saints and the Bucs and did admit that he got emotionally involved. He tries to watch the games and not really be too much of a fan, which, I mean, obviously you're going to be that way when you want the team to win. And the team you want to win is obviously the Saints because it helps Carolina. So he didn't want to be emotionally involved, but he was because he's human. And that's the same sentiment that all the guys who he spoke to in the locker room also had, that they were rooting for New Orleans and they were excited about the opportunity on Sunday, but also knowing that they're now tied. And it's as simple as, hell, you win this Sunday, Atlanta takes care of Tampa, you can lock up the division in the 4 seed next week. Or you just take care of business by beating New Orleans, not just beating New Orleans, but beating Tampa twice, and that could just be it. Or, just win your final 4 games, be 11-6, and win the division that way as well. So those are a couple updates coming out of the locker room and from Panthers head coach Dave Canales on Monday. Can the Panthers earn the wild card in the NFC if they end up being 10-7 and don't win the division? They can, but it will be difficult. We'll go over that scenario here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. NFL Sundays move fast, one big play, and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds. Every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. Live betting is best when the game starts to shift, a receiver gets hot, a defense tightens up, or the momentum flips after a turnover. FanDuel lets you jump into the moment. Live spreads and money lines adjust instantly. Player props update as guys heat up. You can bet next touchdown scores, drive results, totals, and more. It keeps you locked into every snap, every drive, every possibility. And I'm guessing that this Sunday, you're going to also be pretty locked in to what's going on, not just with Carolina, but also what's going on with Tampa and with the Atlanta Falcons. As you look at it, that game will also be played at the same time. Where is this game? Looking at my FanDuel. Oh, played on Thursday. So on Thursday night, you're going to be locked in on all of that, and you can bet live, of course. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you. If the Panthers don't win the division, can they still make the playoffs via the NFC Wild Card? The answer is yes, but it's going to be difficult, and it's certainly going to be complicated for them at the end of the day. Looking over at ESPN.com and their NFL playoff picture, they give the Panthers a 29% chance to win the division and a 30% chance to make the playoffs, with increased odds from the last time we talked about this last week. As far as seeding goes, the Panthers have a 25% chance to earn the 4 seed. Tampa has a 54% chance. So Carolina, again, if they beat New Orleans on Sunday, Tampa loses to Atlanta on Thursday Night Football, and then Carolina beats Tampa next Sunday at home, they will have won the division, and I'm pretty sure wrapped up the 4 seed just looking at the rest of the NFC right now. The NFC North division winner, I think they're going to be above 11-6, and that's the best record Carolina obviously could have, and there would be no incentive after wrapping up the division, which is still possible, albeit unlikely considering just how bad Atlanta is, that it's going to happen next week. But if the Panthers are able to win these next 2 and have Tampa lose the next 2, they would have no incentive to play against Seattle or to play against Tampa as far as having their starters out there. I don't know how Dave Canales, how Dan Morgan, how this organization would approach it. I'm sure Tepper would be like, no, don't risk it at all. We'll find out if we get there. I would love to get there. I personally, I want it to be wrapped up next week, but I would like to at least have still some drama going on for the 2 weeks after that, and for them to maybe to get it done on Sunday Night Football in Week 18. That may be my preference as far as it goes, but we'll see how it all plays out. in the end. But looking at the wild cards right now, the 5, the 6, and the 7 seed, Seattle is sitting at 10-3. San Francisco is sitting at 9-4. Chicago is sitting also at 9-4, going from the number 1 overall seed in the NFC when they woke up on Sunday morning to the 7 seed when they went to sleep on Sunday night. Life comes at you fast. Looking on the outside, looking in, at 8 is Detroit at 8-5. Carolina is 7-6. And then Dallas, can't forget about them. They are 6-1. Now, using ESPN's playoff machine, I was tinkering, trying to find ways that Carolina could win the division. Now, or not win the division, but make the wild card, make the playoffs via the wild card. San Francisco, I did this one where San Francisco, they won out 13-4. Seattle, they lost out 10-7. Detroit losing to the Bears and Rams at 10-7. Dallas losing one game and being 9-7-1. That had Carolina in, but there is some simpler ways to look at this. It's going to come down to conference record. That's going to be a big determining factor when looking at it. So for Carolina, if they're 10-7 and they lose the division, they lose out on and a tiebreaker with Tampa, they would be 8-4 in the NFC, which is actually a pretty good record for them when comparing them to other teams. Now, looking at Seattle, obviously they have a chance in a couple of weeks to win the head-to-head, but looking at Seattle's remaining schedule, they have the Colts, the Rams, the Panthers, and the Niners. The Colts just lost Daniel Jones for the season. Right now, Riley Leonard is going to be their quarterback. I don't think that that's a game Seattle is going to lose. So at minimum, Seattle's going to be 11-6. And in this scenario of Carolina not winning the division and trying to make the wild card, they would be 10-7. There's no world where Carolina could be 11-6 and not win the NFC South. There is a world where they could be 10-7 and not win the NFC South, of course. So this is the world we're talking about. They would then just lose the tiebreaker, not even a tiebreaker. That would be a game behind Seattle. So that's not one that would really play out in their favor in all likelihood. San Francisco obviously has the head-to-head. At a minimum, they're going to be 10-7 as they have the Titans this upcoming week. That should be a win. They also have the Colts. That's a game I would think they can win. The Bears and the Seahawks. So I think that's going to be at least a 11-6 team San Francisco will be. So that will not be helpful for Carolina, even though they don't have the head-to-head. Anyway, Chicago, they're 9-4. Them and the Lions, this is where the Panthers actually would have advantage as far as the tiebreaker goes when looking at conference record. Again, Carolina at 10-7 would be 8-4 in the NFC. Chicago, they should get to 10 wins because they have the Browns this weekend, even though Shedeur Sanders threw for 300 yards on Sunday. That's a game Chicago should win. And then after that, there is a path to where they lose 3 in a row because they have the Packers, who own them, who they just lost to on Sunday. They have the Niners, and they have the Lions. Like, there is a possible way where they could go out there and win on Sunday and lose 3 straight games. And if that were to happen, they would be 6-6 in the NFC. Carolina would be 8-4. Carolina would then win that tiebreaker head-to-head, or as far as just that tiebreaker, if it's just those two teams. Now, as far as Detroit goes, they have the toughest path, in my opinion, other than maybe Carolina, of these potential wild card teams to get to 10-7, as they have to play the Rams this weekend. And then they also have the Steelers, the Vikings, and the Bears. So the Rams, tough game. The Bears will be a tough game. Steelers, they got a big win on Sunday against Baltimore. So that would be obviously a tough one as well. The Vikings would be the easiest of those contests. So if they're able to find a way to where they are able to, if they lose to the Rams, and then they beat the Steelers, beat the Vikings, and then they beat the Bears, they're going to have 5 losses. Or sorry, hold on. If they lose twice. So if they lose, if they're going to lose, they got to have, let's see, if they lose to the Steelers and they lose to the Rams, they're going to at least lose one game against an NFC opponent. So they're going to get that 5th loss right now as they sit here with already 4 losses in the NFC. So they're going to pick up a 5th loss in the NFC in this scenario, no matter what, if they're going to be 10-7. So with that, they would then, I think, at best be 7-5, while Carolina would be 8-4. So Carolina would then win the head-to-head tiebreaker there with them as well. Now, if there's a 3-way tiebreaker between those 3 teams as well, let's say Detroit loses to the Rams and the Steelers and beats the Vikings and then beats the Bears. And then the Bears, they win against the Browns, and they lose 3 straight to the Packers, the 49ers, and the Lions. And then Carolina beats New Orleans, beats Tampa, either the first time or the last time, and then beats Seattle, and then, of course, loses 1 game against the Bucs. All those teams would be 10-7, and then, again, Carolina would win based off of conference record at 8-4. So that is probably the easiest path, is to hope for the Bears to just kind of fall apart after likely beating the Browns on Sunday, or for Detroit to find a way to get to 10-7. You should then have the tiebreaker over both of those teams. Another thing that's important to remember, though, is Dallas. Well, Carolina beat Dallas. The Cowboys have that tie against Green Bay, which can help them as far as making the playoffs. Dallas is at a point in time where they're 6-1. They just lost to the Lions, but they have a really good chance, I think, to make the playoffs at this point in time, because they have the Vikings, they have the Chargers, they have the Commanders, and they have the Giants. Those are 3 games against Minnesota, Washington, and New York that Dallas should expect to win. The Chargers game is an important one. If they beat the Chargers, and that's provided they find a way to win against Minnesota, against Washington, and against New York, they would be 10-6-1. And if Carolina's 10-7 win percentage, they're going to have a worse win percentage than Dallas, even though they beat them. So that tie is really something that can help Dallas propel themselves over even the Lions, who beat them on Thursday night this past week. And, of course, over the Bears as well, if any of those teams are 10-7. So that's another thing to look at. But looking at tiebreakers, conference record, Carolina should have an 8-4 conference record. They should be really in prime position to win a tiebreaker over Detroit, over Chicago, if it comes down to that. They would not win one, of course, against a team like the 49ers. If Seattle falls apart, they would, of course, get that tiebreaker over them because of head-to-head. But looking really at the Lions and looking at the Bears, that's where Carolina would have to hope that one of those 2 teams, or even both of them, are sitting at 10-7 if they're trying to get that final spot in the wild card. So we'll see how it plays out, but the Panthers are actually kind of in an advantageous position as far as that goes. But Dallas losing 1 game will be very important too. But the easiest way, of course, is go out there and to win the division, because the common opponent tiebreaker, which we went over yesterday, will not favor them. I left out a team, but just want to go back over that here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. You know, there's no reason to let big wireless drain your wallet, especially during the holidays. Right now, Mint Mobile is running their best deal of the year. All of their unlimited plans are 50% off. That means you can lock in 3, 6, or even 12 months of unlimited premium wireless for just $15 a month. It's the easiest way to take your overpriced phone bill and give it the full Scrooge treatment. And what makes this even better is how simple Mint makes the switch. No contracts, no nonsense, just real savings and real quality service. Switching to Mint lets you keep your same coverage for a lower price. The service is fast and super reliable, even on the go. Turn your expensive wireless present into a huge wireless savings future by switching to Mint. Shop Mint Unlimited plans at mintmobile.com/LockedOnNFL. That's mintmobile.com/LockedOnNFL. Limited time offer, upfront payment of $45 for 3 months, $90 for 6 months, or $180 for 12 months. Plan required. Taxes and fees. Initial plan term only. More than 35 gigabytes may slow when network is busy. Capable device required. Availability, speed, and coverage varies. See mintmobile.com. Back here on Locked On Panthers, again, breaking down playoff scenarios, tiebreaker scenarios for the Panthers with 4 weeks remaining as they try to make the playoffs, hopefully winning the division, but a backup would be nice to be able to get the wild card, which is still possible. In all likelihood, it happens if they're either tied at 10-7 with the Lions or tied at 10-7 with the Bears, or both. They would then have the tiebreaker based off of conference record. Carolina will be 8-4, while those teams in all likelihood will be at 6-6 and 7-5, respectively. That looking at Chicago and looking at Detroit. For Carolina, another thing I want to go back over. Talk about this on Monday when looking at the common opponent tiebreaker as far as the NFC South goes. If Tampa and Carolina split and they're both 10-7, they would both be 4-2 in the division, because the only games they would have lost over the next 4 weeks are to each other. Tampa would have taken care of Miami and of Atlanta and Carolina once, while Carolina would have taken care of New Orleans and Seattle, and, of course, Tampa once. So they both be 10-7 and 4-2 within a division, which would be, outside of head-to-head, the first tiebreaker between two divisional opponents trying to win a division. After that, it would be common opponent. Went over this yesterday. Tampa right now has that edge over Carolina. They're both sitting at 2-1 in the division with 3 divisional games remaining, but they're both 2-1. If you look at just the common opponents they have played so far, as far as that they've both played, Carolina sitting at 4-5 with the win against the Jets, a loss against the Niners, a loss against the Patriots, a loss against the Bills, a loss against the Cardinals, and a win against the Rams. While right now, Tampa is sitting at 5-4 with, again, common opponents both teams have played so far, with the win against the Jets, a win against the Niners, loss against the Patriots, a loss against the Bills, a win against the Cardinals, and a loss against the Rams. So the Panthers are 1 game behind them. When you look at overall, Carolina also has a win against Miami, who Tampa will play in Week 17. Then Tampa has a win against Seattle, who Carolina will also play in Week 17. So Carolina, looking just at common opponents who that they have played and who Tampa eventually will play, they're sitting at 5-5. Tampa is right now sitting at 6-4. So if Carolina beats New Orleans and splits with Tampa, they're both 4-2. And Tampa beats Atlanta, splits with Carolina, takes care of Miami as well. And they're both 10-7, 4-2. They would have the common opponent tiebreaker because of the win against Miami, and they'd of course be both 10-7. So Tampa would be 9-5 versus common opponents, while Carolina would be 8-6. So both 4 wins in the division, but then Carolina would have that 5th win against the Jets. They'd then have that 6th win against Miami. They'd have that 7th win against Seattle, and then that 8th win against the Rams. Where Tampa, they would have 4 wins in division. They'd have then that 5th win against the Jets, that 5th win against the 49ers, the 6th win against the 49ers. What am I doing? I'm like putting this in my hands to try and get this correct. So Tampa, again, they would have 4 wins in a division, be 4-2. They'd have the 5th win against the Jets. They'd have that 6th win against the Niners, that 7th win against the Cardinals, their 8th win against Seattle, and then that all-important 9th win against Miami. And when you look at it at the end of the day, Tampa would be 9-5 against common opponents. So that's counting a 4-2 record against divisional teams. And then that would be a 5-3 record against the other common opponents, while Carolina, again, 4-2 record against divisional teams. And then they would be then 4-4 against the other 8 common opponents that they would have played, just like Tampa. The game that really would haunt Carolina would be the game back in week 2 against Arizona. Because if you look at it, the Jets are terrible. Both teams beat them. The Niners game, it sucks when you have the 3 turnovers there in the first half and you only get 3 points. I totally understand that. So maybe that's the game that haunts you. But on the road, Monday night against that good team, it's not really one of those things where it's okay, you should have won. The Pats game, both teams got blitzed. The Bills game, both teams got blitzed. I mean, at least that was competitive for Tampa. Both teams weren't going to win that game. They weren't favored to win that. The Rams game, huge win for Carolina. Blowout loss for Tampa. Seattle would be a huge win for Carolina, obviously, and big win for Tampa. Then Miami was a big win for Carolina, even get them in the position where they were at right now, and it would be a good win for Tampa as well. The worst team that those 2 teams really have played outside of the Jets are very clearly the Arizona Cardinals, who sit here at 3-10. That's not a good football team. And that's a team that Tampa only beat by 3 points a couple weeks ago. It's the only win over the last 5 games where they're 1-4. Losing 4 of the last 5. That's the only game that they've won in this 5-game slide for Tampa. For Carolina, that was in week 2. The 2 turnovers on the first drive, the 10 points they spotted Arizona, that was the difference in that game. We saw the comeback after being down 20-3 in this 3rd quarter. We saw them almost have the opportunity to win that game, and they didn't. That would be the game that you look back on if the Panthers end up splitting with Tampa, being 10-7, and losing the tiebreaker. That would be the game you look back at and say, damn, if you just would have won that game, then maybe you're going to the playoffs. And then after that, I don't even know what the tiebreaker is. After you get to a common opponent, let's see. Let's look at it. So it's head-to-head, division record, common games, and then it would be best one-loss tie percentage in games played within the conference. Carolina, again, would be 8-4, while looking at Tampa right now. So Carolina would win the division because Tampa's 5-4 already, and they would pick up a loss against Carolina. So, yeah, that would be the game. That would be the game that would cost you, because the next tiebreaker would be in your favor as far as conference record. So we'll see. Hopefully it doesn't come to that. There's still a possibility if they do, again, lose a division because of the common opponent tiebreaker, there's still a possibility that they can win a tiebreaker at 10-7 if their matchup with the Lions, Bears, or both teams, of course, need Dallas to take a loss, most likely to the Chargers next week, in order for that to really be a realistic thing for Carolina. So they're still in it, whether they win the division or not, just based off of their conference record and how those tiebreakers play out in the NFC. But the hope, of course, is that they can take care of business against Tampa, against New Orleans, against Seattle, be 11-6, and host a playoff game for the first time in a decade. We'll be here over the next 4 weeks to break it all down on Locked On Panthers. That's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, part of Locked On Podcast Network. Hosted by yours truly, Julian Council. Again, y'all subscribe or follow the show free over on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, over on Twitter and Blue Sky at Julian Council, where I'm back with y'all tomorrow answering your weekly Wednesday mailbag questions. All you got to do is either at me or DM me over on Twitter or Blue Sky at Julian Council to get your questions into me right now. In the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole. As always, keep pounding, and I'll talk to y'all on Wednesday.